So as we look at Roman art, let's consider how they painted their paintings. There are two basic methods used by the artists of Roman times. Both of them are shown in these examples. To the left we have two portraits that are from Roman-occupied Egypt, and they're painted in a method that's called encaustic. This might be something you would want to do for your final project. What encaustic means is simply painting with wax and pigments. So you could think about melting crayons in a double boiler and painting with that on a surface. These artists would paint with melted wax on the surface, and it created a very durable painting. This was also used by Egyptians and Greeks to paint the colors on their sculptures. Above are two more paintings from Pompeii demonstrating a technique called fresco, which we have discussed before. And fresco simply means painting on plaster. To do this, artists would mix pigment with wet plaster and paint in sections. Now, if you've ever worked with sheetrock paste, that could give you an idea of what this is like. Now, it's interesting to note that fresco is also how Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, how a lot of art of the Renaissance was painted. In Pompeii, there is one building called the Via of the Mysteries. And within this building is a wall fresco that seems to show an ancient ritual. This diagram on the left matches the wall on the left below, and it shows how the fresco would have been painted in these sections, as the artist has to work with the wet plaster and complete each section before the plaster dries. This same technique was used with the main method of painting until well into the Renaissance. Now, if Rome was the center of the vast Roman Empire, then the center of Rome was the center of the world. Because if Rome's the center of the empire, the center of Rome is the center of everything, the epicenter of everything. Well, that's what the people of Rome believed. At the center of their cities, they built forums which housed markets, government offices, and Roman baths, which were an important part of daily life. To the left is the Market of Trajan from the Roman Forum. It shows a new type of building method involving arches that the Romans developed, and this would be widely used to build cathedrals in the Middle Ages and in the Gothic times. While the arch was known to cultures before Rome, it was the Romans who really developed its use and found ways to create buildings that had not before been created using the arch. Now here's some examples of Roman arches. Building with arches allows for more open space than building with posts and lintels, as the interior of the buildings need less supporting posts. To the left we have two examples of how the arch was used. The first is a barrel vault, and it works, but it doesn't allow for very much light. The second example is called a cross vault, and you can see there's four arches, which then create two arches in the center using their posts of each one. Now, when you use a cross vault, or it's also called a groin vault, this opens up a large space, and yet it is still supported. And this is how the Romans built the Forum. It was also, as I said, used in the cathedrals and beyond. Above left is a section of an aqueduct built by the Romans in France to supply water to a city. Originally, it was 30 miles long. Notice how the arches are used in this case. It's called the Nîmes Aqueduct. And on the right is an arch that was used to, guess what? Celebrate military victory. All right, let's talk for a minute about the Colosseum. The Colosseum in Rome was built just after the millennium. It was built to provide entertainment for the masses. At this time there was very high unemployment, and the government used the distraction of holidays and public spectacles to maintain peace among the lower classes. Built to hold 50,000 people, this great arena allowed everyone to view the entertainment, which included animal hunts, fights to the death among gladiators or between gladiators and animals, performances of trained animals and acrobats, and even mock sea battles where the arena was flooded. At the original opening, which lasted 100 days, it is said that 9,000 animals and 2,000 gladiators were killed. Underneath the floor was a network of tunnels and rooms that housed the so-called entertainment. And above the top seats there were these adjustable awnings that were designed by sailmakers to keep the patrons out of sun and rain. So it was really a very elaborate structure. Now we're going to move on to the Pantheon. After the rule of the Emperor Augustus, there followed a period of expansion and prosperity in the Roman Empire, and this was known as the rule of the 5 great emperors. One of the architectural achievements of this time was the Pantheon, and it was built by the Emperor Hadrian in 125 Common Era. It was built as a temple to all the Olympian gods. This remarkable building appeared on the outside to be simply a Greek-inspired Roman temple. It has a front porch that looks very much like things we've seen a lot before. But within the temple was a dome that was the top of a perfect sphere, 143 feet tall, 143 feet across, supported by walls that were 20 feet thick. At the top of the dome there's a hole called the oculus, which remains open to the sky in all seasons. The floor is designed to drain any rain that comes through the ceiling, and the only light in the structure comes from this one singular source. Above is the temple as it would have appeared in Roman times, in the image above left. And at the right we see the temple today. You know, of all the structures of the ancient world, this is one that I would truly like to see, and has been told to me that it's really something to behold, to be inside of it. Now imagine. This painting to the right is done in the 18th century by the artist Giovanni Panini. Notice the recessed squares in the dome when you look at the top. These are called coffers, and they actually help to take cement out of the dome so that it's lighter. This ceiling was once painted blue with gilded rosettes in the middle of each square, helping to create a feeling that when inside you were part of the cosmos. So now let's look at how they may have done it, how they actually built this structure. In order to pour the concrete for the dome, they had to erect a virtual forest of wooden supports beneath the dome. This is called centering supports, and then they poured the dome in sections. All right, it's time to talk about hairstyles. Really. Fashion did play an important part in the culture of Rome. It goes along with their sensibilities, their way of being in the world. And we can see this in this fantastic do above. This was during the Flavian period. Now, in order to create this style, you had to have a hairstylist that had good shoes, I suppose, and was able to stand for a long time, and a curling iron. You had to have a lot of Roman-style hair goop, and there's much written by men making fun of the great lengths that women went to in order to keep up with the latest trends in Rome. To the right is an older woman, and again we can see the realism in the portraits created by the Roman artist, as opposed to the idealism of the Greeks. Now, after the period of the 5 great emperors, Rome began to crumble into chaos, as the lavish lifestyles and overspending of the government led to civil unrest from the overtaxed lower classes. Several military-style rulers fought for power, and this led to further instability. Also, you know, the empire had grown so large that it was further draining the resources of Rome. It was just too big to keep up with. Above left is a sculpture of a leader known as Philip the Arab. In the eyes of this sculpture, you can really see the sorrow and strain of these unstable times. To the right is the Emperor Commodus, who was insane. He was truly insane. He claimed to be an incarnation of the gods Jupiter and Hercules, and he ordered every month of the year to be named for him. So it would be like Commodus, 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 Commodus every month. Eventually, he was strangled in the bath by a woman after going too far in his crazy antics. Now let's look at the twilight of the Roman Empire. Maybe the very grandeur of Rome led to its downfall. When we imagine all that would be required to maintain such a vast empire, it's easy to see that it was not sustainable. Above is a photo of a wall that ran across Great Britain at the northern end of the empire. This wall is 80 miles long, 4 to 5 feet thick, and it ran coast to coast with a guard tower every mile. Now you think about maintaining this, and it would just eventually become impossible. Above is a sculpture of the Emperor Constantine, and he was the last great Roman emperor. According to legend, Constantine had a vision the night before a major military battle in which he saw a flaming cross in the sky, and he heard the words, "Under this sign ye shall conquer." Now this was when Christians were really persecuted and Christianity was illegal. But the next morning, Constantine ordered all of the shields of his armies to be inscribed with the Greek cross, and he won the battle. In gratitude, Constantine ended the persecution of the Christians, and he legalized the practice of Christianity. He was a powerful ruler, and he erected these huge statues of himself all over the unstable empire. This head above is 8 feet high, and it rested atop a seated body, so you can imagine how big it was. Now, he did not convert to Christianity until his deathbed, but he did play an important role in organizing the practice of Christianity. He convened the First Nicene Council, which organized the books of the Bible as we know it today. I encourage all of you to look into the 2 Nicene Councils because it really sheds light on Christianity and how it was organized in the 1st century after the death of Christ. During the period of unrest prior to the rule of Constantine, the Emperor Diocletian divided the empire in 2. We have the Eastern and the Western empires. He then devised a form of government called the Tetrarchy, or the rule of 4. In this system, each half of the empire was ruled by a leader called Augustus, with the next in line ruling as second in command called Caesar. This plan really further destabilized the empire because, it was sort of a too many cooks in the kitchen sort of setup. And eventually this led to a split in the Catholic Church that still exists to this day. We have Roman Catholic from Rome and the Eastern Orthodox, which were based out of the Eastern Empire, which was Constantinople, which we now know as Istanbul. Constantine created this new capital in the Eastern Empire, as I said, Constantinople, in Turkey. The sculpture to the right is of the Tetrarchs, the 4 rulers, and I want you to note the changes in art that will continue into the Middle Ages. Notice how stiff these figures look. They're much less lifelike than what we saw in earlier work, and this change is also clear in the portrait of Constantine that we saw on the previous page. So lastly, let's look at Laocoon. This famous sculpture has always been thought to be a Roman copy of a Greek original. It illustrates the death of the priest Laocoon and his 2 sons. The priest is being punished by the gods for trying to warn the people of Troy about the Trojan horse. Now this statue has long been held up as an example of the classical Greek Hellenistic style. However, recently some drawings by Michelangelo were discovered that indicated that he may have done the sculpture and then presented it as an ancient Roman piece to raise funds. By now we've verified that it's actually from Roman times. It's a Roman copy of a Greek sculpture, and the discovery of the drawing speaks to the strong influence this sculpture had on Michelangelo. I guess what this story speaks to is how each style of art, each society of art, influences ones that come after it. And great masters throughout time have learned from those that went before. So this completes the slide lecture on Rome. Thanks for listening.